Donald Trump's team suddenly saw the light and stated that they had been subjected to Russian propaganda about Ukraine and no longer believed that there are actually any Nazis in Ukraine. The ban on the Orthodox Church, the Russian language, and so on. Therefore, all efforts should be directed towards supporting Ukraine. One of the bloggers closest to US President Donald Trump and a supporter of the MAGA movement is Laura Loomer. She simply has a million-strong audience, regularly appears at the White House, and personally communicates with Trump. She has drastically changed her position regarding Ukraine and Russia, stating that for many years she was a victim of Russian propaganda. To understand how important this is for Ukraine, Laura Loomer is not just pro-Russian. She didn't just claim that Vladimir Putin is a defender of traditional values and Christians, that Ukrainians are Nazis. She didn't just write a column for Russia Today. No, she is so influential that people are talking about it. It was on her tip that Donald Trump once fired an entire general, Jeffrey Cruz, the head of the Joint Intelligence Agency, as well as the National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, if you remember him, and possibly several other American officials.
Laura, that right? Hi, Laura. Boy, you are something. What spirit you have. Laura Loomer, thank you, honey, for being here. I appreciate it.
And now this very Laura Loomer says the Russians blatantly deceived the Trump administration and they fell for Russian propaganda, so it's time to wake up. My name is Pechiy. Let's take a look at this case together. It's a very interesting case, but before that, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, give a like, and leave any comment under this video.
I've been so anti-Ukraine for so long, and wow, we fell for Russian propaganda, and I fell for Russian propaganda.
So, Ukraine has gained a completely unexpected ally in Donald Trump's circle, Laura Loomer, and this is an absolutely amazing awakening in Trump's circle. One of the bloggers closest to US President Donald Trump and a supporter of the MAGA movement, Laura Loomer, who regularly appears at the White House and personally communicates with Donald Trump and his officials, has drastically changed her position regarding Ukraine. And she says, damn, for many years I was subjected to this brazen Russian propaganda. The other day, she released a podcast in which she directly stated that many Americans, including, she says, Donald Trump, quote, put on rose-colored glasses and began to treat Russia with excessive sympathy. Every time someone mentioned Russian crimes, many Americans considered it an attempt to spread lies against Trump and the conservative movement, Loomer says. Well, like, Russian propaganda, according to her, has brainwashed Americans so thoroughly that even when there was clear and obvious evidence of Russian crimes in Ukraine, and even in the United States of America, Trump supporters were still convinced that it was all lies, that things weren't so clear-cut, that it was the Democrats' tricks to smear their beloved President Trump. Well, next I'll give you a truly astonishing quote from Laura Loomer, and then I'll explain why it's so important and valuable that she's on Ukraine's side. Laura Loomer's words caused a real uproar within the MAGA movement, which could turn them towards supporting Ukraine. Because let me remind you, most members of the MAGA movement are deeply pro-Russian. They believe in all these conspiracy theories and all the nonsense that Russia spreads about Ukraine. So Laura Loomer is a very influential MAGA blogger and activist. She's so influential that, according to rumors, Trump once fired an entire general, Jeffrey Cruz, based on her tip. He was the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency. Naturally, Laura Loomer is pro-Russian, just like most members of the MAGA movement. Like Tucker Carlson, she's from that circle. Laura Loomer also considered Vladimir Putin, as she herself said, a defender of traditional values and Christians. She even started a column in the Russian propaganda outlet Russia Today. Moreover, when she was writing for the Russian outlet Russia Today and receiving money from Russians, she firmly believed that in this way Russia was giving her freedom of speech, which America under the Democrats was not providing her. And so Laura Loomer wanted to finally reinforce all her propaganda about Russia and Ukraine. And she sent her correspondent, Andrew Moore, where? To Ukraine, specifically to Odessa and Kyiv. Well, let him actually show the Nazis on the streets of Ukrainian cities who have banned Christianity, killed priests, banned the Russian language, and so on and so on. Well, that was basically the idea. Laura admitted that she had serious doubts about whether she should send her correspondent to Ukraine because she was afraid she would get a lot of hate for her anti-Ukrainian stance. People in Ukraine are aware my correspondent will visit, and it could go badly. Still, she chose to proceed. And when her correspondent came back from Ukraine with a ton of material, she watched it and, to put it mildly, was shocked. And next, I'll give you a direct quote from Laura Loomer, so you can understand the full depth of her realization yourself. Now, when I
see people saying that we need to denazify Ukraine and that we should continue our brutal war with Ukraine,
when I see Russians saying things like we need to denazify Ukraine or we need to continue our brutal war against Ukraine, while they pretend to be some kind of Orthodox Christian country, at the same time they are killing thousands, hundreds of thousands of young Christians in Ukraine and also supporting real neo-Nazis in the United States of America, making clips from their podcasts. I'm just like, wow, we fell for all this Russian propaganda. I fell for Russian propaganda. So, when Loomer Unleashed had the opportunity to send a correspondent to Ukraine to visit the front line and meet with Ukrainian officials, and there were many American senators there, at the Odessa Security Conference, Andre Moore asked me if I would approve sending a correspondent to Ukraine. I thought about it for a while. I hesitated to do it because I wondered, what would people think of me? For so long, I was so anti-Ukrainian, I kept repeating all those talking points, thinking I was saying the right thing, not realizing how much I, as a conservative and Trump supporter, or just as an American citizen, was being emotionally manipulated by online propaganda. So I was a little ashamed, to be completely honest, to send a correspondent abroad. Because I thought, well, people will attack me, they'll say I'm a hypocrite, they won't be grateful and won't give me a chance to change my mind. In the end, Loomer did change her mind and stated that Russians are simply manipulating Americans and lying about the war in Ukraine. And then Loomer on her podcast, which by the way is listened to by about 1 million Americans every day. She talked about how Russia kills peaceful Ukrainians with missiles and drones, lies about Ukrainian Nazis, how it massively strikes schools, hospitals, residential buildings, and so on and so on and so on. For context, just so you understand, Loomer is one of the bloggers closest to Donald Trump. She communicates directly with the US president. She appears in the Oval Office and can even give Donald Trump advice on personnel decisions. In addition to the aforementioned General Jeffrey Cruz, it was Laura Loomer who also played a role in the dismissal of National Security Advisor Mike Waltz and several other administration officials. Trump just blindly listens to her as a source of truthful information. And here, two factors coincided. The change in Loomer's position could have been influenced by the visit of blogger and fellow political activist Candace Owens to St. Petersburg, to this economic forum, after which she praised, as she said, the greatness of the Russian Federation. And on the other hand, her personal editor's simultaneous trip to Kyiv and Odessa, right during the most massive shelling by Russia. And you know, of course, it's hard to say whether Laura Loomer's change of opinion is situational or if it's the beginning of her evolution and realization of what Russia really is. Is this just a 7-minute revelation, or will Laura Loomer now, as they say, start transforming the MAGA movement from within and make it more pro-Ukrainian? No matter how you look at it, she is one of the most scandalous figures in the conservative world of the United States of America, but people listen to her. Once again, she has quite a huge audience. And such an admission from her about Russian propaganda could already make many people at least start to think about it. So even if it's situational, Laura Loomer has become an unexpected and useful ally for Ukraine, at least for a while. And that's very important. For Ukraine, she became our ally, even if only temporarily, right at the time when Donald Trump's opinion seemed to start changing a bit regarding Russia's war against Ukraine. I talked about this in my previous episode, so go to the channel, subscribe, like, and please leave your comments under this episode. Share your opinion, your conclusions about this situation. I would appreciate it. We can also chat there. And if you want to support the work of this channel, you already know what to do. The links and details on how to donate are in the description of this video. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Bye everyone.